Hey, what's up everyone? Chip here. Today I want to talk a little bit about how to use some rendering programs and Photoshop to create some kind of a sketchy render type, kind of like what we're looking at here. This is a medical drone I designed for Fast Company about a year ago, and I added a few Dosch Design people there on the right that you can see towards the bottom, and a vignette. And I kind of want to talk about how you can use this technique to create kind of quick, sketchy looking presentations, things that aren't quite finished or photorealistic, and that way you can get things done. In my case, I do this because I don't want a client to actually react too quickly to the photorealistic presentation. We're still in a concept phase, more or less, and it's a really good way to get them to stay focused at kind of the sketch or concept level. So to get started, we're going to switch over to my favorite modeler, which is a solid modeler, NURBS modeler. It's kind of the guy that wrote Rhino originally actually started this company called MoI. And if you haven't seen this product, it's pretty amazing. It reminds me a lot of the simplicity of McDraw and some of the early Macintosh apps. It's so simple to build things in here. It's kind of crazy. Anybody can pick it up in just a very short period of time. In fact, I kind of think of it as SketchUp for NURBS. So I'll use, when I'm on polys, for quick poly stuff, I'll typically use SketchUp to sketch some stuff out sometimes, but I also sometimes jump right in here and use MoI to sketch things out. Anyway, so this is the right, what we're looking at here is actually the drone, the medical drone itself. And it's, so you can see it's not, I can zoom in a little bit, but it's not terribly detailed yet, right? So it's could use a lot more detail. It's one of the reasons why this sketch technique works so well, is because it can take a set of models that isn't too detailed, and it can actually present them in a kind of a more detailed look, if you will. So if I was going to make this into a fully 3D photorealistic render, which I have done, I would want to probably to go in and detail this out a little more. So as I said, here we have our drone, and one of the great things about MoI is it's a great tool for meshing solid objects, NURBS-based objects. I think it's one of the best out there. I've been told it's better than Rhino, although I don't use Rhino much. I play around with it, but it's really good. So let's take a look at this. So what we'll do is we're going to select this object, and we're going to say File, and we're going to hit the Export button, and we're going to call this the drone. We'll set it up as an OBJ. You can export all these different sets. So when I'm going back and forth, say into something like OnShape, I'll use a step file. You can use that also if you're going back and forth into other CAD programs. If you're going into SketchUp, it does a great job converting it. SketchUp got Lightwave, some other ones. Anyway, the OBJ one is the best one for us for Lightwave right now. So what it's going to do is it's going to mesh this. As you'll see as we walk through this thing, we're meshing it, and it's actually doing pretty good, except notice how faceted this particular area is right here and across here. So I want to change that angle from 12 to something maybe like 7. So let's hit 7 and hit Tab, and then we'll do it again. And so now you see I've got it's a lot smoother across here. Now the other thing I'm looking at right here is I see all of these large triangles can sometimes create smoothing errors in KeyShot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say divide larger than, let's do 50. Let's start there on the curved, yeah. So now, okay, so now we're seeing where that's getting divided quite even more than the 7 degrees, which is nice. So I'm going to actually go back to here and make this about 9. And then I want to break those up into, let's do 90. So as I do this, it's continually updating. Let's do 150. So I'm getting kind of a good feel for how big these areas are. And then instead of curved, now watch, I'm going to say all. And now watch, it'll grid all of this out. So now I'm not going to probably get those kind of smoothing errors that I saw before. So good. Now I've got the blues representative of the glass. The rest of it is just white, and the reason why that works for this particular sketch technique is that we will use ambient occlusion for the white, and then the blue, of course, we'll use glass for. So I'm going to hit the OK. Now it's going to go ahead and export the file, and once it's done, it's finished. So now we're good to go. Okay, now we're in KeyShot, and it's going to be a simple matter just to import our object. So go to our demo, and here's our drone object, and we'll open that up. Okay, use the defaults. Excuse my cough. It's getting over kind of funny cold. Anyway, here's our object. Zoom out a little bit. Pretty nice. Let's go into my environment, and first things first, I'm going to take and make this white on the background. And then I'm going to change this to, say, 55, so we have a little bit more of it. It's not quite telephoto, but closer to that. Then I want to import a character, right? Actually, before I do that, let's set up some lighting real quick before I import the character. And what I'll do that is over my HDR editor light here. I'm going to basically hit this Generate HDRI button, and you can see it's going kind of slow. Okay, so here's where it generated. You can see it's off. The reason why is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a one-point light, but I'm pretty sure there's a memory issue right now between Camtasia, the recording software, and this. So what I'm going to actually do instead of this is I'm going to load one that I've already generated. This one right here, same exact thing, but what it is, it's a point light source. So you can kind of see now that I've got pretty dark shadow, kind of a high contrast shadow here on this. But for now, I kind of wanted to show you that because we're going to get to that a little bit later. But for the very first rendering, we're going to go back to our standard startup. Yeah, let's save that old one as our single point light. Okay, so there, saved it. Okay, so we're pretty good now. Now once this is done, what I want to do now is I'm going to import a character to give it scale. Before I import the character, let me show you where I got the character. So let's run over here to Dosch Design, doschdesign.com up here. This is a great resource. I have a lot of their products. They have some superb HDRI environment maps that you can use. They got great people, lots of different people, as you can see. You know, 33 different groupings of people. This is the construction worker, but there's children, teens, and humans, and there's all kinds of stuff. And what's nice about it is these things, for the most part, import directly into KeyShot without any kind of issue. So we go back to this is the one that I'm using. Construction Worker 1. And what's nice is they have this little content overview. If you click it, you open up this PDF. PDF's got all the different, you know, low and high polygon versions of what it is you're going to be seeing. So let's go back to KeyShot and Shift B. Let's import. KeyShot 6. This number 3 low, you'll see that he'll come in actually very large. So we'll go back to our scene. I think that my number here is for scale somewhere around, I think it's like 7.8 or something like that. Let's see. And then of course, if I need to move them, I'll use the move tool to kind of punch them out a little bit and slide them forward and rotate them around, and then see what we have here. Use kind of a little Detroit perspective. Something like this might look nice. Go to my camera. Let's go ahead and save it. And yeah, refresh. So there we have it. Okay, so great. So now we have our character for scale, and our drone. So let's go to materials, and what we're going to do is show you how we add an ambient texture. So if I just double click on this, I'm going to go in this advanced mode, and I'm going to hit this material graph, and here it comes up. And I'll right click and I'll say textures, and I want an occlusion texture, and I'm going to hook that directly into the diffuse channel. Okay, and I'm going to go into the occlusion, and I want this radius to be, in this particular case, this is probably 60 or 80 units. I'm going to actually jack it up to about 80 units, right? So this radius is about 80. Okay. And when I do that, notice it gets a lot darker in here, right? So if I take it down to 0, it's a little bit lighter, right? So what I'm doing is I'm basically it's basically making the little darker areas stand out just a little bit more. So, so I make it 200. Look, it's really dark. So I want to make it about 80, and that's going to work. And that's going to be the material that I use. I will call it ambient occlusion, AO, and we'll save that. So there's that, and I can shift click on it, or actually I'll just grab one of these, another ones that I've already built, drag it onto him. So now I've got a couple different materials there. Then I just need to go and grab my glass, and let's take something like this, drop it on my glass, and we're pretty good to go. Although the thing that we're going to have trouble with is that when we render the toon shader on top of this, we're not going to get the lines on here. So what we might want to do is render 2 versions of this, one with the toon shaded, one with the toon shader, and then we're going to have the ambient occlusion one like this. So now that we've got that understood, let me go ahead and set up the rendering for this particular one. So I'm going to go back here, refresh, make sure I'm in the same place, save my file. I'm going to call it the aopass.bip, and now that I've got it, I just hit this render button, and I want to render a ping, include transparency. Let's do a 1600 by 1600. Now in this particular case, we don't need a lot of samples for the quality, because if it's a little bit grainy, that's fine because it looks a little sketchy, so that's fine. So I'm going to hit the render button, and then we'll come back to the render as we go. So let's see. Let's move this up. There we go. Okay. Okay, great. So we've got a great render here. We saved it in that same folder we had the other things at. You can see it turned out kind of nicely as far as an ambient occlusion included render. So now that we're done, the next thing to do is that we need to do the toon. And because we have glass, we're going to actually separate this out. So I'm going to go in the scene and click on this, and that's one. I can turn it off. Okay, make sure I got it. That's the right one. So I want this, that glass, and then I want that one. I'm gonna basically hit the right button, say add to group, and I'll say new group. Let's call it glass. Okay, and I want to click on this one and these two glasses, and I'm going to say add to group. Oh shit, cancel. I selected everything there, didn't I? I just want to click on this one, that one, and that one. That one, that one. There we are. Add to group. Add to group glass. Okay, so now I can turn these off, so you can see. Okay, so now that I've done that, I want to actually render out everything if I can, but I want to render the glass separately. So let's go back up here, close the drone, take this, and I'm going to create a toon shader for that. So I can go into my, well, let's see, let's go into some custom things. I have a toon shader here. As a glass toon is what I'm using right here. I'll use that one. Okay, so there's my glass toon. It's got a transparent mode. And let's take a look at this real quick. So I've got a color white, I've got transparency jacked all the way up so you can see through it. The problem is, even though I see through it, it won't generate an alpha with that unless I can basically build one out of Photoshop. But I'm going to do this so I don't have to do that, right? So turn this on. I want to basically go to environment and turn off the ground shadows. And pretty much that's really all I need. Once I've got this, again, we'll take a look at this. The transparency is all the way up. I've got a contour angle of 60, so there's not much shading. There's not much shading on there that you'll see. If I bracket down, it might get a little more complex, but it's a pretty straightforward little piece. So once I've got that done, all I need to do at this point now is just render that out as a separate. Let's actually, before I do that, let's go to output. Make sure we're going to the right spot here. Tech demo. Okay, so this one's going to be there. This is, I'm going to call this one glass tune. Okay, so include transparency, same size as everything else. We'll hit the render button, and we'll go off and render this, and we'll be right back. Okay, and here's our glass render done. So we're done with that. Now I'm going to go back into my scene. I'm going to turn off all my glass and go back and turn these guys back on. Turn my shadows on. Let's go into lighting. I'm sorry. Here, ground shadows. Okay, so we put the ground shadows back on. Now we're going to load up that single point shadow. So we'll go here, and this is that single point light. I'm sorry, single point light source. So this is going to give us a little more of a dramatic lighting look, as you can see. And I'm going to adjust that as we move forward. But first, before I do that, I'm going to grab and throw a tune shader on some of this stuff. Right? I'll grab one here, drag it onto here. So I've got a couple tune shaders that have loaded up on that. Now, let's take a look that we've done that. Let's take a look a little bit at this tune shader. Understand it. This contour, of course, the color is white. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit since we have. Okay, so we have. You can see there's some grays in here, which represent some of the shading and the shadow for this. So contour angles. As I adjust this number up, you see the number of lines kind of go away, and if I jump it down, there's more numbers of lines, and yet it gets a little darker. So I'm going to kind of leave it up in this area right here. And I particularly want to look at our guy over here. Actually, I'm probably going to create a different shader for him. So we'll get this one locked down first. The contour quality, I found that 1 really seems to work pretty good. Yeah, I assume by going higher, it's going to be a little tighter or a little more refined, and probably take longer to render. We can try it there, but no transparency. And that's pretty much it. Par contour, you can set this to turn off, and you won't see as much of the details of the lines, so I leave it on. The outline, the part multiplier is higher than the part, so the outline is kind of going to be a little heavier weight. The part's going to be a little lighter weight, so you can see how that works. And I think if I edit that one, I've got 2 tune mains. Yeah, so that's, if I edit this one, I can just adjust it. So I'll just do that. So now I'm cranking down the contour angle. Let's zoom up on him if I can, and you'll see that as I crank down the contour angle, I'm starting to get a little more detail of his clothing and everything. So I'll move that down to something that I think that I'm going to like. Looks pretty good there. Everything else, the width and everything else is pretty good. So okay, so we'll just do this. Okay, I'm going to go back to my camera and refresh it so that we're locked and loaded. Now, the only thing I can do here I might want to play around with is the actual shadow. I can just move this, and look at the shadow. If you look at it, it's not a very tight shadow right now, so I might want to say reduce the ground size a little bit. That always sharpens your shadow, so I just did that. And yeah, I think I look at this. I think almost where I had it at the beginning with was probably may have been best. That kind of flat, low flat kind of look like that. So let's go back to my camera. We're good. And now what we do is very simply, we're going to do another render. And we're going to, again, do a transparent ping and at 1600. So let's go ahead and let that start. Okay, now the render's done. You can see it looks pretty good. And so now really we're done here in KeyShot. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to quit it. Or actually, before I quit it, yeah, I quit it. And then we just need to go to Photoshop. So let's run over to Photoshop. So this was our first one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say File, Open, and I'm going to go to my tech demo, and I should have, yes, the first one was this one here. Okay, so that's our first one. Then let's open up the other two. So this one and this one. Okay, so this is our glass pass, and this is our one without the glass. So so this is going to be our main document that we're going to work on. And this first screen, or first layer, this object is the ambient occlusion layer. Let's zoom in on it a little bit. You can see it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, very first thing, is create a new layer, drop it to the bottom, and fill it with white, and so I can see what's going on, right? So, and then I'm going to put a layer on top of that one, and that's what I'm going to use for my vignetting. So if I go into use a paintbrush, something like this, you can see that anything I draw behind it is going to give me it'll give me behind, including, you know, the glass and everything. So it's kind of a nice feature. So that glass is actually transparent in this one. In the tune it wouldn't be. So let's go ahead and add the actual tune. So I'll go in here and I'll grab this layer and I'll drag it over to this one. Now I need to drop it in so that it's perfectly aligned. And if I hold the Control and the Shift key down at the very same time, that's exactly what will happen. So if I turn them all off, you'll see there's the actual line drawn for that. So if you can see, you can't make it out too greatly. So what I might do is Option drag down, Option drag down. So I've just made 3 copies of that. I select them and I do Command E, or I say Layer, Merge Layers, and it merges them all into one. So now I have a darker. So now it's darker than it was. Right? Okay, next I want to go to this tune layer. Actually, this is the glass. This is the glass. Let's close that. We'll go to the tune layer, and we're going to add it. Now, earlier I mentioned you hold the Control Shift. Actually, I mistakenly spoke. I'm going to drag this to this layer, hold it down anywhere I want to, but just hold the Shift key down. If you hold the Shift key down, it's going to drop it in exactly where it needs to go. And when I dropped it in, you can see I dropped it in, and it's on top of this particular. Now drop it underneath here. Now we see this line that's being shown for the actual transparency. So so I'm going to leave this top, and I can probably, you know, again, it's still not very dark, so I can probably re-render it too, but I'm going to leave it for that for now. It'll look okay. So now I've got 2 different layers here. I've got the ambient occlusion, and I've got the tune layer. So this particular tune layer, I'm going to duplicate, Option drag down, and the first one I'm going to call, this is going to be the normal, and this one's just multiply. Okay, so this one I set to normal, and I'm going to drop the opacity. Actually, let's turn off the multiply one. We're going to drop the opacity on this one. So as I drop it, you're going to see that it's going to start overlaying the line drawing kind of nicely on this. And what happens as I drop this is that the line drawing almost fades out. So I've got a kind of a nice image, but the line drawing is just a little too light. So I'm going to hit this multiply one, and I'll set this to multiply. And now I've got this really dark line drawing. That's too much, but I can adjust the opacity. So this multiply one is where you kind of adjust, you can adjust the thickness of the line if you want in here, right? So, and that's how you know, between the two, the multiply and the normal, you're able to get a pretty good sense of line weight on this thing. So now we have this done. We're going to go in. I'm going to actually push the opacity of this up a little higher. Something around there. Yeah. Okay. So now we have this done. The next thing to do is we're going to have to make it sketchy, put a little vignetting into it, and I'm going to show you how we do that next. So before we start to put a vignette in here, before we do that, let's talk about color, right? So this is all kind of black and white right now, and if you look at this original one, you see that we use this kind of a blueprinty kind of a color scheme, and I like that more because a lot of times the black and white gets looking a little dirty. So what I'm going to do here is basically take this color balance up here that I'm using, and I'm going to just grab this and drag it over here to here, and I'll move it to the top, and you see it's already affected the color of everything. If I click on here, you'll see the properties are like I basically just pushed over the blues and the midtones, pushed them over in the shadows, and pushed them over in the highlights. So it's minus 17 plus 22, minus 13 plus 19, minus 15 plus 20, but it's roughly the sum. I just kind of play with it. So that's what that is. So now I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to go into this layer here below that, and I'm going to take my brush, B for brush, and if I hold the shift left, I can get, or actually what I want is I want to find a different brush. I want to find this kind of harsh brush, which is something like this at 48 maybe, or trying to find out where all the different ones are. Usually that's right at the top, but it's not now. Okay, here we are. So this is something a little bigger than that. Let's try this 60. Okay, so yeah, that's not bad. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take the opacity, round it up to about maybe 56, and if I hit the right bracket key, it gets larger fast. And if I zoom out just a little bit at 50%, I can hit the shift key and oops, and start to draw across here, and to create kind of a let's go a little bigger, softer, to kind of create a little of a vignette behind here a little bit, so you can see how this works. So I'm just, you know, quickly just sketching some stuff in, and then I want something kind of light down below, and that's easy enough by just, you know, a couple of these guys like this. So, you know, something like that. So, in fact, that might be just a little too light. So if I want to, you know, basically pull that off, I can go hit the E key for eraser and go, let's take it off about 40, and just, you know, back it up a little bit like that. So maybe a little more down low. There you go. Okay, so that's kind of a real quick vignette that we've added to it. I'm going to add some graphics, but I'm just going to grab this one right here, stick it over here. We'll just throw that up here, just so we have you know, something we can talk to up there. And the next thing to do now is we're going to go ahead and start adding some reflections, maybe, and a little bit of line work, right? So the line work is what really pulls it off. So let's go in here. I'm going to zoom up. I'm going to probably accentuate this area right here. So I'm going to go over this. Here's that top area. And it's really, that particular line work, it looks like it's almost white. That's right. So we're going to leave it. And I'm going to go get my brush again. You see it's big. And I'm going to go really small. So I go tiny. And I'm going to make it opacity about 46. And above the top, I'll create a new file. And you know, what I do is, since I don't use a Wacom, I just hold the Shift key down. Let's move this a little bit bigger here. So I just hold the Shift key down, and as I move, I'm actually tracing off. You know, I'm just going from one point to the next, right? So again, you know, just not a big Wacom fan. So this is kind of tedious. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, and I'll just speed this section up. Okay, so now we need to, you know, if I want to, I can kind of add some highlights, like right in here if I want to, or across here. I might just create a new layer, hit the brush, and you know, maybe just show, you know, throw a quick reflection that matches our the background one. So I can come in here, there we go, like this to that, and oops, that's not going to work. This opacity's got to be way lower than that. There we go. Okay, something like this, and maybe, oops, let's go smaller, a little smaller. Yeah, okay, that looks good. So now I just need to erase out, you know, oops, erase, oh, 100%. There we go. So I'm getting a hard brush, and I'll erase out that reflection, and then maybe jack with the opacity a little bit. So give it a little. See, I could probably do the same thing with on this side as well if I want to. Brush, come in here and make it kind of a little bigger, and maybe do something like this, and then a little tinier one that's a little higher, like that, and then hit the erase one more time. Yeah, I can erase all these. Erase that out, so I can, that kind of thing. And then if I want to, I can punch that highlight out. In fact, that might be just nice, just stick a layer right here, hit the brush, and go get maybe something like this brush, undo, swap here. Let's see, yeah, so that's good. So I'll soften that up quite a bit, jack with the opacity, just kind of punch it out like that. So you can keep playing with it forever, literally. And but for the most part, let's just call this one done. Let's go over here. Let's grab my signature layer, drag it over here, stick it here, that right there. And lastly, one more little fine tweak. Let's go to this background layer. I'm going to jack with the opacity a little bit. You know, a little more depth than that. Then come up to this layer. Above that, I'm gonna add levels, right? So, and I think I'll just, and I'm gonna mess with the gamma in here, right? So I could probably do the same in curves, but this is real easy. And then that's pretty much it. So hit the save button, and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I enjoyed creating it. Like I said, I use this technique a lot for generating some concepts. Have a great day. See you next time.